Okay, we're doing another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff to have a really interesting review for you guys from the brand Ming. They are a high-end and hot independent international micro brand, and essentially Horologer Ming was founded by 6 enthusiasts from around the world under the leadership of Ming Fan, and he's a photographer, designer, business strategist, and above all, a lover of watches. Together, the Ming team draws from over 80 years of total collecting experience, ranging from vintage to avant-garde, from quality affordables to six-figure commissioned independent pieces. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this would be a traveler's watch. Some key common characteristics and design. If you're looking for something within this space, of course, you're going to want to see that GMT or world timer functionality, so you're able to track multiple time zones with relative ease. This is the 22.01 GMT Kyoto, released from 2023, and the serene Kyoto dial reflects the textures and colors of a traditional Japanese garden with placed stone and perfect moss, overlaid with the impression of water conveyed by an intermediate sapphire dial. The dial has a dark green outer chapter ring and gray center, both with grained texture, and the GMT markings in silver. This is quite a looker, and it's really hard for you to just look at it in terms of seeing all of that depth when you're looking at it static. So I'm looking forward to moving it around for you guys a bit. You can actually get this piece from Belmont Watches in San Diego. This is going for $42.50, and it is new and unworn, and I'm happy to share it with you guys. So with all that said, big shout out to Belmont Watches, of course, for always supporting the channel. And let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so this is, of course, from a brand that has been very much a new kind of hype brand that has really risen to a very heightened level of popularity and fame, and for very good reason. They're just doing something that's so different, guys. I mean, look at the multiple levels on this dial. Look at just the handset. There's no running seconds hand, so I know that does kind of sedate a bit of that visual interest that you normally would get from an automatic mechanical timepiece. But man, this is just pure quality, and I'm not sure how well that's going to be able to be conveyed in the camera, across to you guys in the screen. But I will say, if you have handled higher end pieces, there are those types of things where it doesn't always translate well into photography or video, but you just kind of have to see it, especially when you have so many non-traditional aspects. Here, it's not like you're going to be able to see, handsome beveling or attention to detail in terms of some of the dial furniture. It's all printed, but I mean, it's printed to a very sharp standard, but also it's just the level of ingenuity and design in terms of the way everything balances and comes together for a cohesive design. So a little bit about this in terms of the details: 38 millimeters in diameter, which is an amazing size. And I know to your eye, it might seem quite large just because it's a bit loud in a lot of ways, right? It's only 10.8 millimeters thick, so that's really quite thin. 43.9 millimeters lug to lug. Again, these are all numbers that are very wearable for any wrist, really. And this is made out of grade 5 titanium. So man, this is just, I mean, some of you are probably just enjoying that finishing and thinking, oh, that's a really handsome steel sports watch. Well, guys, this is titanium. They were able to finish titanium to this level. It is very impressive, to say the least. Now, getting into the crystal, it is a flat sapphire with double-sided AR, so anti-reflective coating on the outer and the inner. So you're going to make sure that when you are enjoying this at any viewing angle, you're just going to be enjoying the dial and less of the reflections. Of course, there's going to be reflections on the studio lights, but you can see there, even then, even against that reflection, man, it's still extremely legible thanks to all of that dimension. Now, getting into some other details, it does have a fixed concave bezel there. You can see, and which is nice because that polished surface is going to be protected because it is countersunk there with that concave shape. So it's going to be harder for it to be scratched and dinged. And then when we get into this beautiful crown here, it is a push-pull setup, nicely signed. You can see that circular logo there. So it is, I would say, decorated. I don't know if you want to consider that signed, but they definitely didn't just leave it there due to lack of effort. They still did add a bit of visual play there. And you can see even down to the crown itself is multi-finished. Check that out. There's areas of blasted satin within those crevices on that toothy gearing there in terms of the grip. Now we get to the case back where you're going to see what they call the Ming caliber 330.M2, which is basically going to be a Sleeta SW330. But of course, with all of their decorations, it is fully blacked out there, which is really, really cool in terms of the rotor, the plates. Of course, the rotor is also skeletonized. So very, very handsomely done. Definitely, again, not traditional when it comes to that layout. This has a 50-hour power reserve and beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour. And of course, you can also notice that is a display case back, which is actually nicely executed. And it also has screws in terms of the way that it's secured. So it's not screw in, it is screwed down, with the... or however you want to, I guess the semantics around that, screwed in versus screw down. Maybe that would be screwed in, not screw in. Maybe let me know in the comments what you guys prefer. But yeah, that's just, even the finishing on the back of the case, the brushing is just really impressive. Then, of course, we get to the star of the show here. Beautiful hour index that has been laser etched into the top sapphire there, giving it that extra pop in terms of just the depth of this dial. It's actually a composite 3-piece dial, and it does use Superluminova X1 lume. It has 100 meters of water resistance, and yeah, this thing's pretty sweet. A 20 millimeter lug, which is great in terms of if you want to swap out the strap. They even do have quick release mechanisms, and then it also has a bent setup so that it actually butts up to the case quite nicely. And one thing, I don't know if you're going to want to switch out the strap because this thing is insane. Check that out. Nicely signed. Some of you guys who are into watch collecting might recognize that because this Barnia strap which is actually made out of the same high quality leather used in Hermes luxury handbags, is handmade by Jean Rousseau Paris, and they even have it signed. So I think that's really great. So very, very cool to see that. I mean, these straps alone are quite expensive, and you can see in terms of even the underlining there, you're going to get this beautiful suede underlining, which is very, very nice. And this does taper down to 18 millimeters at the signed tuck buckle. So instead of a tang buckle, you call it a tuck buckle because, which is pretty smart, I think. You just, let's say you're weaving this in for your wrist, and then you just tuck the access. Isn't that cool? Look how clean that looks. And this is, again, brand new. It still has the little protector plastic on it there, but I think that is just really, really cool. And again, very imaginative, right? When you look at that, you might not necessarily put it all together just by the look, but man, look at even the 3D milling done on the clasp itself, which if you look, technically that could be a micro adjust hole, right? So if you want to really get this thing tailored to your wrist, you can actually move that one position up and it'll be able to make it a little bit tighter, of course, as well as the spaces in between hole to hole. So I just think that's really, really smart. Of course, this is a brand new watch, so I'm not going to be putting it on the wrist and cinching everything down, just because this strap is just as beautiful and supple as it is. I think that the owner should be able to break this piece in. So what I'll do is I'll just lay it across here so you guys can get a look. Of course, if I do get my wrist too close to the camera lens, it's going to appear much larger. Again, this is only a 38 millimeter, but it does have quite an expansive dial, and even within its layout, it's very non-traditional, because it doesn't just have, you can't just push the indices closer to the center, right? Like here you have this beautiful crosshair dial, multiple colors, multiple finishes there. Look at the texturing of, it's kind of like a stone. It actually kind of reminds me of a solar panel a bit there, of course, but with a much more handsome grainy texture to it. So very, very cool. I mean, I love the way the hands play, and then you have that very subtle GMT hand, which perfectly meets up with the 24-hour index there that just kind of circles that center gray space. So we'll move this, but again, big shout out to Belmont Watches. Thanks, guys. And we'll just lay this across my wrist here so you guys can get a look at that. Ooh. And then we'll just tighten up the frame here so you guys can get, a bit more of a detailed look, but still a truer aspect ratio in terms of how this may lay on your own wrist. And man, that is a good looking watch. Again, this brand is one that's brought up at the very highest levels of collecting, and as much as we all love those industry mainstays that have been around for hundreds of years, it's stuff like this that really excites. And I will say that something like this will absolutely hold its own. People will be asking you about your watch, where you got it, the story behind it, and then if they know what Ming is, then they're going to appreciate that even more. But even if they don't, there's just so much here in terms of everything that's going on. I think this is absolutely a beautiful conversation piece as well. So with that said, let's actually get this set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Yes, very, very cool. And again, just something different, guys. Look at that. It definitely gives you that kind of Tron-like aesthetic, very futuristic, but a little bit of retro futuristic, right? There's something that's still quite familiar about these lines and about the design language. It doesn't feel too incredibly foreign. One thing I always like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe include a bit of harsh lighting, which typically could expose any types of factory defects. But all you're going to see here is just a peaceful and serene watch with some really interesting highlights that just, you look at that crosshair as the light glints a little, it just plays right across there, man. And then of course the 3D nature, check that out. Even in the lower light, you still get that sense of depth, which is going to be something that's hard to do with a traditional layout. But because of this multi-layered setup there with the sapphire dial, and of course even having the indexing on the back of the top sapphire, and then you have your handset skeletonized and floating somewhere in between, it's just very, very cool. And you know what? They're not trying to say, hey, look, we're trying to give you all the information at all times with this Lume. Really, of course, now that GMT hand has slowly kind of tucked away behind the other handset, and it's not loomed, so there's no expectation there. So I mean, it's just, this is a very good looking watch. And again, this is not meant to be anybody's one singular watch that's the only watch that they wear. This is definitely the watch of a collector, someone who appreciates diversity and a unique flair. But my goodness, I can absolutely appreciate this piece. Now, closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, really perfect proportions, very comfortable and balanced, and there's a great juxtaposition between the hyper modern dial and the very classical case design lines. Like, we've seen these lines before, but normally they're in something that is like way art deco, like that just wouldn't have the level of modern even the typeface that they're using here. So it's just very, very cool to see those two things playing off each other in a way that really comes together at the end of the day. Now, in terms of model variants, these models are mainly produced in small batches, so options can normally be limited. And by the time you watch this, I don't know if you're watching this when this first is released or years later, so there could be options that I'm unaware of. But right now, this green GMT is just something special on its own merits. Now, in terms of comparable models, being a rather dressy GMT, one might cross shop this against, let's say, a Grand Seiko mechanical GMT, but I would say the more austere avant-garde styling definitely give it a totally different flavor. And I mean, quality wise and kind of respect in the industry wise and collectability wise, it's right up there with some of those industry mainstays and at a very early kind of stage within the brand history, which I think is really cool, guys. So for me, guys, bottom line, this is a truly stunning work of art. Again, not meant to be liked in mass by the mainstream, but instead loved by a small eccentric niche of the collector community. And I have to say that I must fall into that because I'm just stunned by this piece, and hopefully at some point I will be adding something from the Ming lineup into my own personal collection. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Have you guys had your eye on Ming? Does it completely not resonate with you on the other side and you're just not sure why anybody would want something like this? Or are you also kind of finding this quite drool worthy like myself? So again, let me know down in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like, and if you already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.